gets their coffee cups. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Maitri Sitharaman. That's pronounced my and the number 3. That spelling will throw you off if you're looking at your programs. I am the director for content for Fortune Magazine's live media. I have been covering business and economics for 18 years across the world. I've done it mostly on television and recently went back into the print business because, you know, we make so much money in print. The one thing that I can tell you of working with CEOs around the world is that you get to notice certain behavior traits. And it has been a journey and a half for the 18 years I've been looking at CEOs, whether they're in Asia, in the United States, in Europe. I've never worked in Latin America, so unfortunately I can't give you any insights there. But there is definitely a new class of global superstars that are emerging, and they don't look like Lady Gaga. They're on par with heads of states, Nobel Prize winners, acclaimed civil society leaders, and we're calling them CEO activists. They're speaking out about issues that are close to society, not usually very close to their, you would think, their business plans or their business strategies, but nevertheless, they seem to be talking from their own personal hearts and what they hope is their organizational values as well. And they have become game changers on a range of issues. This is not a plug, but it will actually tell you what I'm talking about. Recently at Fortune, we decided that we were known best for our Fortune 500 list, the Fortune Global 500 list, the most powerful women list. All of these lists came about for a reason. So we decided it was time for a new list. And we put out a list called the world's 50 greatest leaders. That's the main issue. What timing? We planned this conversation and an entire cover for it. And one of the key things that we found was that a lot of the leaders that we were quoting, number 1 being Bill and Melinda Gates, who made it to ranking 1, and my editor-in-chief, Clifton Leaf, actually wrote this piece in the magazine that said, some of the values they all had in common, whether they were politicians or CEOs, was the fact that they were listeners, really, really good listeners. They were also extremely optimistic. They did not take things as something that they had to take lying down. Change was not something they were scared of, and that they were hardy people. Now, what he meant by hardy was that they were tough, that they took every challenge and knew they could change things and make change happen. And I'm honored that 2 of those transformational CEOs leading these changes in this new form of leadership of 2019 are with us. Jacques van den Broek, he is CEO and chairman of the executive board of Randstad. It's ranked number 450 on the Fortune Global 500. It's a Dutch multinational HR consulting firm operating in 39 countries, about a 59-year-old company, as I overheard you say. So I didn't say 60. I was careful. I was listening. Isabelle Cochet is CEO of Engie. She ranks number 3 on our Fortune Most Powerful Women International list, even as Engie is now at 104th as a ranking on the Fortune Global 500 list. As we all know, it is a French multinational electric utility company operating in energy transformation, generation, natural gas, nuclear, renewable. The list goes on, but you operate also in almost 70 countries on 5 continents. You 2 set a bar here for many of the changes that are happening. And going by what I just said about listening, optimism, being tough and hardy for CEOs nowadays who want to do CEO activism, do you think this is the environment for CEOs to argue for that optimism? Who wants to take it first? Jacques.
Oh, yeah, well, I think optimism goes with the job. I think if I were to go through the company looking like, well, I don't know if there's any future, that it wouldn't be very inspiring. And honestly, it comes natural, so that's good. But yeah, you're not just in your company, you're also in society. Certainly our company, you mentioned it, we're in labor markets every day. So we see people who are doing well, we see people who are not doing well. We see solutions for it, and then you sort of feel compelled to speak out and to be a constructive, optimistic force. Yeah.
For sure, and well, optimism by construction. If not, it's not a job for you. And listener, to be able to listen, and you started with that. I believe it is extremely important. I believe that as leaders, we have to understand the emerging future. That's probably the first rule, in fact, is to understand what is around, to understand the system, and to understand where are the, fundamental trends. And then to listen is absolutely key. In fact, we have, I believe, to behave exactly as we didn't knew anything. Listening, not only in the company, but outside the company, and really being able to feel what is at stake and what is in front of us. And then to make the link between the company as it is and the company as it probably had to become in the future, and to organize that step-by-step change, that shift, to be sure that you prepare your company for the future. That's, in my view, that's probably the most important. And if you allow me, because you let me speak, so I believe that what is extremely important, I'm not sure you said that, I don't know if you agree, is that I believe that's the end of times where you had very powerful leaders, but lonely leaders. The world is too complex for that. So the ability to multiply, the ability to make that your employees, they are themselves able to listen, to transform each of your employees as a sensor of the reality, and then to co-conceive that future with them, and then organize the shift of the company. That's the key, in my view, in the world of today.
I love the fact that you talked about the lonely leader not being lonely anymore, or not having to be lonely anymore. It's an interesting shift in trajectories. The one thing I do want to do is also give a housekeeping note. This is going to be quite an interactive session. I'd love for you to participate. Make sure you put your questions up on Bcast. There is a code there of the forums room if they put it up on the screen, because I was supposed to say that right at the very start and I forgot. So I will take onus for that. There you go. To participate, use that particular link. Put the session code in as OECD2, and we will get your questions and I'll keep asking them. But also remember, we're physically here. We can actually ask these two amazing people for their advice, their guidance, ask them what they did right, ask them what they did wrong, where would they change their methodologies, and how they're going to change, because these two leaders are also all about change. That brings me back to a question about a personal driver for you to no longer be that lonely leader that existed 10 years ago. There were plenty. There are still quite a few out there. What drove or drives someone to become labeled as a CEO activist from their heart?
Yeah, well, I talk about my company is if you want to lead people, you need to give them a purpose. So we have close to 5,000 branches across the globe, and people always ask me, do you know if they're open every morning? So actually, I don't. So do you have any control mechanism in place? Because otherwise, you get empty branches, closed branches. No, because I firmly believe that my people have a purpose in life, and that is to find people jobs and find my clients candidates. And out of that purpose, you also look, again, around you, and in society, you see that same purpose, that same, well, at least speaking for myself, that same willingness to improve people's lives and to speak up about it. And I think there's also a difference in the time lag between a CEO and a politician. We build companies to last. I think I have only one role, and when I leave is that Randstad lasts another 59 years at least. And that means that you mentioned it already, we see these long lines and we're willing to speak out, and you can only deliver on long lines if you take some tough decisions. So, yeah.
Was there something that happened to you in your in your life to make you think that way? Because that was not always the way CEOs operated. You ran a business, you built it to last, but you didn't really think about the zoom out effect of looking at society in one picture. You looked at your element in the society.
Yeah,
What,
well,
was there a personal influence for you then?
I was not brought up that way. Our company is a family company. Our founder is still alive. He's 85, and he wrote in his annual report at the end of the 70s already that a company doesn't have the right to exist if they don't contribute to society. So I started in this company when I was 27. And relatively easly, because we do we change people's lives, and that's a kick. So that's easy. So and nowadays with millennials, you see that's their main reason to work at a company. Either you found your own, or if you're still with a corporate, it's a corporate that does something which is relevant. And that's sort of a gift that keeps on giving.
What was the gift that kept on giving for you to become this transformational leader at Angers?
You know, being active in the energy field, I mean, let's be concrete. We were at Engie one of the biggest CO2 producer of the world. So at a certain moment, you have to ask yourself, okay, I'm part of the solution or I'm part of the problem. So, I mean, and hopefully we decided to be part of the solution. And we effectively decided to shift. But again, that's a decision we've made after 12 months of in-depth work with everybody in the company. I took 1 year to circulate everywhere in the world, 3 times, discussing with our teams, the governments, the regulators, the clients, of course, the associations, to see, of course, if, in fact, not if, but how to get there. Because that's one thing to say, okay, we have to go to zero carbon, but you start from where you start, you know? And then, okay, how is it manageable and what are the conditions? And we decided this bold move with really a long-term strategy, saying, okay, that's the future. And we are a company that is designed for the long term. So this is a long-term strategy. We cannot pilot, we cannot drive a business at this scale without having a long-term strategy. It would be just crazy.
What drove that? I mean, what drove it for you personally? Because at some point, you end up taking a lot of the heat. When things go right, you get the credit, but you also get a lot of the heat. So when you decide to do something like that, what is your driver to make you do that?
It's both the conviction that it was really for the good of the company, and also my personal convictions. And we are in a world where people, they need to be aligned between themselves, convictions, and also their strategic views for the company for which they work. And leaders are as the others. So personally, I couldn't run a company that would do something that wouldn't be really in-depth aligned with my own convictions. We are not different from we very often we speak about the millennials, but we could be part of them.
Just older millennials. At
Yeah.
least I am. Not
so
we.
No, we would like to think we are. Go on.
No.
I'm giving it away.
So that's a mix of the two. That's really a mix of the two. And if you expect from me that I say that it is easy, no, it is not. It is not. It is not, because by definition it is a long-term strategy, and a lot of constraints are very short-term in our world. So you have to, as a community, you have to be courageous. But not only the CEO, it's the community of leaders in the company. They have to be courageous, because for a certain period of time, you have to make decisions that are good for your company long run. But let's take a very concrete example. We decided to stop coal. That is to say, to stop the production of power through coal plants. But that's good for our company, for the value, for the license to operate, which is the biggest asset. It's good. Now, the day you do so, the day you close your mines, your plants, you lose contributions. That's very simple. And then you are, if you look at your company quarter after quarter, at the beginning, you accept to shrink your company. which is with a market that is very short-term driven, not easy. So you have to be solid enough to go through a first period where you have to make difficult decisions. The good news is that you don't need to wait very long, in fact, to be able to demonstrate that, yes, it is good for the company. We are just 3 years after that decision, and we are more profitable than before. And we cut by 50% our CO2 emissions. So it is possible to do both. That is to have a good, a positive impact while improving your economics. But it is not the first month. It takes some years. And in the world of today, it is it can be seen as long.
And by the way, short-term gains is also boring. So yeah, most of my people are not interested in making a record profit, which we did 4 years in a row, but it's not interesting. So you want to have impact on society. I think your goal in life is also a goal that people are, they're going behind the flag. So we want to touch 500 million people in their working life in 10 years' time. So, that's something that's worthwhile. That's far out from where we are today. It's relevant, it's the people in your neighborhood, it's the people you touch, makes the job of a consultant at my company relevant. So I think that's interesting. At the same time, yeah, you need to deliver every quarter, but that's, yeah, it's almost hygienic. That doesn't keep me awake at night, and it doesn't get me up in the morning.
Does something that keep you awake at night include, say for example, shutting down a coal mine? You have the short-term reverberations of that in society for obvious reasons. Does it keep you awake at night that even CEO activism, because it's relatively new across the board, that even CEOs are not talking to each other enough yet to coordinate? Because then you're starting to look at a whole bunch of people you're going to have to deal with to find them new jobs, to get that anger level to go slightly down, to see the bigger picture of what she's doing. So is there more coordination that we need across the board, more conversations amongst these CEO activists?
I think it's always good to talk more amongst each other. You've got a plan, I've got a plan, we all have a plan. We very much chose the cooperation with OECD a few years ago to have this platform effectively internationally, also with governments over time, to coordinate actions. I think there's not much use into being a sole activist. So yeah, absolutely. I'm doing it, but then more in my country, where we have this group of CEO activists. And our goal is to leave our country in a better state for our children than we have today, which is, as you all know, not a given at this moment in time. So that's also one of the reasons for my, call it activism, at least you call it activism.
I don't call it activism. I think it's a label that's out there. We'll just call it doing what needs to get done, right? I'd love to get everyone involved at this point. If anyone has any questions to kick us off, there's one right in front. If you can get a mic.
Thank you. Two big companies. Can you explain us how they...
I'm sorry, where is that question coming from? Put your hand up, stand up. Well, all right, we will go with yours. Please introduce yourself and your organization and make your question quite short, please.
Thank you very much. I'm from Argentina, and I'm CEO of Eidos Global. It's a social community company in UK and in Argentina. It's not working? Yeah, it's working today. Yay! And I manage only 20 people in 10 countries. Speaking in the frame of emotion, and you speak about not being CEO alone, I'm afraid that if I give all the fears that I have by pushing the organization forwards, if I share that with my employees, there will be fear. They will feel the fear again, and they won't be so motivated to actually work every day. So how you do the management of the uncertainty at the same time giving the confidence to your team?
Who wants to take that? Ooh, I think you should.
Not an easy question. I will tell you the way we manage that. When we started the shift I just described, we discussed with the teams everywhere in the world and with the unions, and we shared the reality, what is in front of us. And I told them, look, there are businesses will just stop because that's not the future. It means that we will cut jobs at certain, on certain technologies by definition, but we'll create others. And we'll manage that together. And we signed an agreement with all the unions in Europe. And all of them. Even some of them which were honestly not used to sign.
Even the French.
Yeah. All of them. And putting the rules on the table. Discussing the rules of the game. After having discussed the future, the way we see it, the rules of the game. In case, the way to retrain people, to organize the mobility in the group, to make that people they effectively can be redeployed. So the obligations of NG as an employer, but also the obligations of the employees themselves. And we discussed that and we signed that. And we have been able to implement that huge shift over 3 years only just because, or in particular, because we've been in situation to discuss that very frankly. I'm a strong believer that you need to share. And because the fear, if not, is there, anyway is there. And then you need to discuss, put that on the table and find the answers, and in particular the concrete elements in terms of process. And that's, in my view, the best way to give trust.
Jacques?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you shouldn't underestimate your people. Your people are in your same business as you are, so who are you not to discuss that with them? They are also uncertain. We're also going through a massive transformation where we use technology to redefine how our people work. And I say, there's a lot of risks in doing that, but the risk of not doing anything is far greater, so let's go there. And when you take your people along, they get that same mindset, like, okay, well, we're in it, we're early involved, and we'll give it our best. So, and you become less lonely because they get to share your issues, which is great.
In a lot of cases, what you see, they see the same. In fact, they see the same, or a better way, because they are on the field. So even if you don't, in my view, even if you don't share that with them anyway, they know. Then it's better to look at that frankly and to find the solutions.
How do you share the optimism that folks like you feel? How do you share it with your team, and how do you get it to trickle all the way down to people on the ground?
Well, first of all, we create that goal. So at some point we became a world market leader. That's nice and that sort of stuff. So people like, and then you get this goal of 500 million people. People like that and they want to go there. So there's optimism, but at the same time, it means a lot for their daily work. And with you, it even means that some people lose their job. That's in a way even worse. So yeah, and be face to face. I think, well, judging by you, but also me, spend a lot of time. I hate being in a boardroom. I hate doing meetings and that sort of stuff. I like to be out there with clients, with candidates. And then you also keep your own optimism, by the way, because if you stay in your boardroom, well, at least for me, I become less optimistic. But if I'm out there, everybody, okay, let's go. So yeah, talk, communicate. But then, yeah, your carbon footprint, of course, increases because you're flying. But yeah, you can't have it all.
Teleconference.
Also, yeah, but the mix. You cannot run a business by Google Hangout. That doesn't work.
Working management, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And to go back to something you mentioned is purpose. And that's incredible, the energy that is freed up in your system when you really have a purpose that is shared. That's incredible. And in particular, when we decided to go to zero carbon, the amount of energy, commitment, engagement, optimism that came, everything was not easy, that's not my point, but the mindset changed and we got a lot of, in terms of engagement, incredible. And to the extent where we, in fact, we passed this period in with economics that were even better than we anticipated. I told you we decided to shrink our company, but in fact we maintained our net income, which was not expected. I can say that now because il y a prescription.
Whole room of
But
people, just so you know.
but honestly, we were, I mean, we anticipated a decrease at the beginning and as fast as possible to come back to the initial level, and we maintain. We maintain because additional, I don't know, performance coming from everybody. That's fantastic. So, and effectively then, the more you are with people, the more you capture this energy and you are able to then to reflect it again. And so that's a positive loop that is working well.
There is one thing, at least when you talk a lot directly to people on the shop floor, and we're a flat organization, basically 3 job categories, but then for management, it's a bit of an insecure situation because changes in many companies lead to delaying and lead to a sort of a revamping, a reinvention of what's the added value of management. So the shop floor is easy, but for management, you really need to take one extra step to give them a sort of a safety. And at the same time also say, hey, you also need to shape up in this, you know, the content of your job is also massively going to change. So embrace it, and you shouldn't wait for that. Otherwise, they will derail a bit the change.
I wanted to open it up to another question at the back, right there. This gentleman in the red tie.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Chakoyan, and I run a company called Strategic Narrative Consulting in the Netherlands. And the session is called Activism by CEOs. And to me, that assumes that that's where we want the leadership to come from. And the reason we're in this world is because the businesses have globalized and our regulatory powers have not. You know, Zuckerberg recently called for regulation because he's facing so much backlash that he expects the regulation to come. Do you think it's a lot to ask from CEOs to lead, to self-regulate, to do better when you're accountable to shareholders, not necessarily elected, right? So do you feel that our world is balanced well enough for us to have a future that's more inclusive?
Isabel?
I believe we have to be activists as a CEO because people are. Clients are more and more, and talents are. So people now, they choose the companies for which they accept to work. And then if you are not taking that into account, in fact, the value, the most important assets of your company, which is the license to operate, is no longer there. So I don't believe we have to wait for regulations to act. Typically in the energy field, we could say, okay, there is no price for CO2, let's wait. A price for CO2 will come, I'm sure. I mean, that's the sense of the story. It takes too much time. So do we wait, but with the risk that we are less and less aligned with what the society wants? Or do we anticipate, convinced that this is anyway the future and that we have an interest to align ourselves in advance and gain a kind of leadership in the ability to embody that future? And so that's what we decided. I believe that this is the best for the company. And one day we will have a CO2 price, and then we will be, I mean, even more supported by the regulation than today. But I see that in that, I mean, order. And that's true for our business energy, but I suppose that there is the equivalent for yours.
It's also true for the labor market. There are massive shifts in the labor market because of globalization, because of the mismatch, because of people having less the fixed job for life and that sort of thing. And you do see governments grappling with that. And we are very active in painting this picture of the, in our view, ideal, most inclusive labor market. And some countries are picking it up, others aren't. Immigration, also a very hot potato. Yeah, you get people from other countries. We're actually in Europe in dire need of other people from other countries. And what do you do with those? You do see regulation always lagging a bit. I heard you say something about shareholders, and I think the short-term shareholder is, well, we're not interested in the short-term shareholders. We have this long tail of shareholders that hold the share for 2-3 months. I'm not going to waste my time explaining the strategy, but you do see the BlackRocks of this world saying, well, these are the companies we want to invest in, and those are, I think, the companies we're trying to lead. With CEOs that in a role that we would like to play, which we think is more sustainable, also for shareholders at the end of the day, and with you even with short-term results, shorter term than you experienced.
I think that really does raises the simple question of, if you are a company that is looking at the long term, you are looking at these institutional investors who want to put their money or park their money with companies that are looking beyond short-term profitability, and research shows that the majority now want to do that. The question then comes, how do you balance what the short-term implications of that are? Because at some point you're going to see a pushback. You've seen this with all the transformation work you've done, where certain works have been written off as spin, other works have been written off as, oh, profitability is not as good as we expected it to be, but we want you to be socially responsible. We want you to be the transformational CEO, but we're going to give you a cacophony of criticism for not making as much of the big bucks as we expected as well. It's the balance. How do you balance when you have that much criticism coming at you, when you're trying to do exactly what the institutional investors want you to do, but it takes time? The patience question.
You have to forge strong convictions first. You know, you get a lot of advices coming from everywhere, and so at the end, with your community of leaders, you need to forge your convictions on what the future looks like, and the best, and this has to be extremely clear and shared in the company. And then the way to go there, you can adapt, adjust permanently. In my view, organizations have to be able to reassess permanently. That's also one of the characteristics, I believe, of the greatest leaders, is the ability to set systems that are agile enough to systematically assess what they are doing, reassess and correct and learn. And then I know, you know, the direction, the purpose is one thing. The way you go there, you systematically assess the way you, assess your results, your performance, and you can adjust. You can accept to adjust, to change some of the elements of your strategy. Reassess systematically. If something was wrong, okay, not bad. Not you can just change. What is critical is,
be transparent about it.
Yeah, and be transparent and say what worked well, what worked, less, and the way you address it. That's something that is much more relaxed in a certain sense. The purpose is one thing, the big direction is one thing, but then you reassess permanently what you are doing. And with our community of leaders, we have set in place some rituals where we very transparently, effectively, internally for the moment,
but also externally.
in some cases externally also, after we assess and we say, okay, it was not so good, so we change.
Yeah, but at the same time, you cannot be a CEO activist if your company is not a successful company, honestly speaking. Because if you're a struggling company, you can talk about lofty futures, but then you're not credible. At the same time, you get the shareholders you deserve, so to say. I'm pretty transparent with my long-term shareholders, where I said, you know, we're going to digital change, so work being delivered more digital, artificial intelligence. Where is that taking us? What I see is that the change of my clients, also candidates and my own people, goes slower than expected. That's not a problem. That's better than you're being overtaken. And then, also shareholders can be patient as long as you deliver. We're not optimizing the short term, but we still have a good delivery on the short term for a shareholder to stay in. So yeah, I think that's the mix. But again, it comes with communication, spending time with your shareholders. and being as transparent as you can be within compliance and all that, those rules.
What do you do when the shareholder wants you to be that transformational leader and is saying they're being patient, but they're actually not? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, now if they're not patient enough, they sell the share, right? So
What if they can't sell the share?
if they can't sell the share, you
Yeah.
can always sell a share. You just call your broker and they'll sell the share with you for you. That's that hasn't happened so far. I do have these discussions where they're saying, yeah, but you're optimistic and with you it's always gonna blah, 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 blah. But doesn't it take more time than you thought? I said, yeah, absolutely. It takes more time than I thought. You happy with the dividend? Yeah, okay. And then, yeah.
You had that same experience as well?
Exactly the same. But you know, themselves, they are under pressure. It's a chain. Yeah. At the end, they are not the owners. We are all in this room the owners of the money. And that's something really that we have to improve. That's incredible. Look, I don't know if we look at the statistics, it's probably true in this room also. If you take an individual, somebody in the street, as a client, the guy is very aware of what he consumes. As a talent, he is aware of the company he's working for, of course, and the quality of the strategy, and the fact that the strategy is or is not aligned with his own convictions. As a saving provider, ask around you, nobody knows. I don't know if you know where your money, your saving are invested.
I hope so. I do.
But
surely hope
congratulations,
so.
because if you look at the statistic, 8 people out of 10, they don't know. And then, in fact, these guys, the investors, they are there, they manage your money, and they are challenged on the fact that this money effectively creates some results. And probably altogether, we have to be much more careful in the way our own money is spent. The day it happens, things will change very rapidly. So here there is something in the chain that is not working well. And that's the same society, that the same guy who is extremely sensitive to the company he's working for, that is absolutely not aware of the way his savings are managed. So there is something that we have to organize collectively to make that everything is aligned. And the day it is the case, we will see an alignment between, the fact that all the BlackRock and all the others, I received the same letter as you do. I had the discussion with the guy. And he told me, look, that's the same for me. Yep. That's the same for me. I am under pressure myself. So here we have, because this is a listed company too. And then we have to align the planets here.
Yeah. My bank sent me a top 10 of the most sustainable and high dividend yielding companies. And we weren't on there. So I called my bank. I said, I got 2 problems. First of all, I'm not on there, and I should be, given our dividend yield. And the other one is you're advising me. And it's not great advice. So yeah, it's a tough industry. They're also under pressure. Talk about disintermediation of financial industry and brokerage. They just cannot spend a lot of time on individual companies. And that's also a role we have to play, is educate analysts into how to invest, not even in our companies, but we visit many industries, right? We know about automotive, we know about energy. So they also ask me, how is it going? I say, that's your job.
There you go, that getting out of our little siloed boxes to actually having conversations with people we would usually not have conversations with. But you bring up an interesting point that I want to actually look around this room and get an idea to answer Isabel's question. How many people here know where their money is invested? Just to get a snapshot, I do want to understand. Raise your hand if you know where your money is invested. Where and how? Okay, let's change the question up. Thank you, Anthony. Do you know where and how your money is invested? That's a better question. I think you may be absolutely right. There is a conversation that we all need to have. Yeah, it's not bad, but this is a room in the OECD.
We have a very good audience. Congrats.
I didn't raise my hand because I'm not allowed to know, because they might be my clients, and then, yeah.
That's a wise way of investing too. But again, this is a room at the OECD. We would be in a position to actually be aware and know. But you're absolutely right. That trickle effect of activism, how do you then influence people to change their mindsets to where you want them to be? Because you are a change influencer. You are one of the most powerful women in the world in terms of business. You are one of the most powerful Fortune Global 500 CEOs in the world. How do you change mindsets in other industries that you have to deal with?
Oh, well, maybe not other industries, but I definitely try to how do you call it, influence the public debate. So because we have all the facts about labor markets and that sort of thing. So I said we need immigration in Europe shortly after Angela Merkel. But it's...
I go for you.
Yeah, well, it's economic. When you have the facts, then you can already in many countries, certainly in my home country, 20% of SME companies cannot grow because they lack people, let alone the mismatch. So I said we need 105,000 people every year for the next 10 years, just in the Netherlands. Multiply that by X for Europe. And then first you're shunned, so hey, come on, and we can retrain, and what does he know? So it always sparks a debate. So it's a bit like throwing a rock in a pond somewhere. And you know, I can be asked back because it's a fact, it's not an opinion. I think that's crucial. I'm being faced a lot with opinions, and I state facts. So I think ideally we have most of our discussions around facts, and that helps, takes out the emotion. And you can look for solutions, which might not be easy, but then still it's a fact.
I would say exactly the same. And also come with solutions, concrete solutions. In the energy field, there is something that is extremely, a very simple challenge, I would say. Everybody wants energy transition, but without any increase of energy price. And that's, look at our streets. I mean, you have on Friday 1 million of students in the big cities in Europe, and the Sunday you have the yellow jacket. The students, they ask for energy transition more quickly, and you have the yellow vest saying, okay, but purchasing power. So the role of a company like Engie is to be able to reconcile the two. And then we try to come with solutions, and solutions that effectively allow people to get some solutions saving money for them through energy savings. So we propose very simple things like to change the boiler at home. If you change your boiler at home, it means that you gain 30% of savings on your bill the day after, because much more efficient, because, okay. So we couple that, and then we say, okay, now for the remaining part of your bill, you can afford to change your energy in a decarbonized energy. So we come with very concrete, simple things. We do that for retail, we do that for companies, and we propose concrete solutions for zero carbon transition that is affordable, to reconciling these two big challenges that are, I mean, there's a famous debate between end of the month, end of the month and end of the world, you know. People saying, okay, end of the world, that's okay, but I have a problem with my end of the month. And we cannot avoid to look at that. I mean, that's a reality, purchasing power. So we try to come with concrete solutions.
I talk a lot with other industries because without people, so the energy transition, we calculated that if you want to go in my country with 17 million people and you want to go to full energy transition at home, and you look at the amount of installation engineers would have, it would take 153 years. So you can only solve things if you got the idea, you got the financing, you got the fact that you can sell it in a good way to people, in a good sense of the word, but then it needs to happen. Same on defense, for example. The US says Europe needs to spend 2% on defense. That means more people. So you have thousands of more people that need to join the army. And will they do so? If not, So it sounds funny, eh? You want to defend the country or the region or whatever, but if there's nobody holding a rifle, that's so we're constantly talking about, okay, good idea, and I think we need to do more of that on how to solve the issues we have with available people, with training, with immigrants, and that sort of thing. So that's an interesting debate.
Because that's what we need at this point, isn't it? Because at some point, we're having an issue with trust in CEO activism. We're having trust issues across the board with pretty much every actor out there, whether it's government, corporate. I was in Brussels this morning and in a group of mostly civil society actors who all pretty much had a similar take on corporate activism or CEO activism. They just didn't trust it. Is that something that needs to be addressed first, or can it be addressed with the end of the month, end of the world crisis and debate that you have to deal with? It comes up with energy prices. It comes up with the yellow vest. You have CEO activism at this point almost looked at with a little bit of distrust, saying, is this the new CSR?
Yeah, well,
checkbox.
I think the lack of trust comes with uncertainty. So a lot of people are uncertain about their future, which at the same time is understandable. If people are uncertain, they're uncertain, but we're going to be short of people. So I think to battle this uncertainty, lack of trust for whatever message, is let me explain to you what your future could look like. Let me explain to you your possibilities, but also the necessity that what you need to do, they're your own responsibility. So again, that comes back to how you treat things in your own company. You go out, you have sort of an inconvenient truth, as we need to close our coal plants. But then let's work on a solution, and I think that's lacking. I think we're totally, sitting here at least, we're totally willing to have that debate with people, because we can get out of this. I'm personally very frustrated with, again, lack of facts, uncertainty, people being unhappy. We are, certainly also here with the OECD, there's a few reports coming out on the labor market outlook, our own future of work. There is a potential, I wouldn't say bright future, but there's a future that we can all live with, but we need to act, and as in yesterday. It's a bit like climate.
And absolutely, and walk the talk. I mean, there is a characteristic, in my view, in the world now, that what matters is consistency. You cannot say something that you don't do really. And the opposite is true. I mean, so trust is about transparency, consistency, and these young people we mentioned during this debate, they absolutely need to be convinced that what you say is real. And maybe they would prefer to work for a company that is carbonized and claims that it is, than for a company that claims that it is not and in fact is. I mean, the vertical consistency, alignment, authenticity is absolutely critical in my view. So it is, and there is a huge value behind in terms of trust between you and the society, you, the company, and the society, or inside also in the company between the leaders and the teams. That is very, very critical, and that's new. If you compare with 20 years ago, you know, the information was not there. So we are in a world that is fully transparent, and that's good, but demanding, but in my view, deeply good.
It is, however, sometimes quite a challenge to bring your message out. You need to invest in media. Media need to invest in the message. That's also, you mentioned money. What is it again? $1 in offline is a penny in online, and that's the amount of time that's being devoted to a message. And yeah, what I think we're all trying our best to deliver stuff in 5-second sound bites, but some topics are not really meant to do that. So I think we're in it together. I cannot say to media, you only bring positive news, but at least bring facts and nuanced news. and don't over-amplify the wrong sound bites, because that also amplifies a lack of distrust and fuels the uncertainty. I think that's a pity.
I think we have a question from Anthony here in the front row, and then one question at the back as well, please. The first question there, the second question here.
I wanted to throw a rock in the pond. And I say this not because it's necessarily what I would like or what I find easy. And the rock in the pond, listening to you, you can imagine music to the ears of the OECD, fact-based debate, evidence-based debate. So we've all lived the last few years, and we know that facts and evidence have had better periods. Facts also evolve, and I remember a time when experts told people to buy diesel cars. That was the future. Experts said that. And maybe there are people out there who remember that time. There was also a time when, before people had the concerns they have today on climate change, a coal industry was deemed to be uneconomic in a country, you can tell by my accent which country I'm thinking of, in the 1980s. Again, experts telling people. I think that we have to be very mindful of the fact that we also are responsible for what has come before us in terms of expertise, advice, and analysis. And you are in that position, in a sense, of having to pick up that legacy, which may not be the most comfortable legacy in the world. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. And the second is a tougher rock in the pond, and that is, you all know the changes in the United States for the last 2 years, and how CEOs have had to respond to very difficult situations. This is a hypothetical, but imagine that the head of government of the Netherlands is Geert Wilders, and imagine that the head of government of France is Marine Le Pen. How would that change your job, your position as CEOs, and how would you respond in situations, hypothetical situation, in terms of an activist stance?
Yeah, so for the people who don't know Geert Wilders, that's good. But he's, by the way, a waning political populist leader, but another one comes in place. So if he were to be the prime minister, we would educate him on the value of Europe for our country. We're an open export country. We would calculate for him fact-based. And that was the same in the 80s and in the 70s, by the way, so that's a consistent line. The value that Europe has for the Netherlands and what would happen if he would do what he would like to do. And the second one is, specifically for me, we would show him, and again, fact-based, all the companies that cannot find people, where these people should be coming from, and that he should face the fact. I think when populist leaders come into power, they need to still govern the country and get some results, right? They're looking for help. There is much more going on in terms of constructive dialogue behind the scenes than there is on stage, as you know. Not here, but with politicians. So, you know, go in there. What do you want to achieve? It's the same in the US. We were advocating with the Obama administration to give out double the amount of visa for highly skilled professionals. 72,000, we said we can easily have 150,000. It didn't happen in those days because it's not, it sounds more harsher, but there were the same sentiments sometimes also. And then building a wall when you have 2-3% unemployment. That's not great, right? So will they do it? I don't know. But at the same time, we would still have a face-to-face debate. And yeah, then see what happens, right? That sometimes you just have major influence and then it happens or it doesn't.
You want to take that?
I sign 100%.
France and you, how would you deal with that?
I would try to have the same conversation as you described.
Yeah.
And about Europe first, for sure.
And what happens when that conversation goes nowhere and they stand their ground, like build a wall?
Well, then
because facts are being thrown out there. Oh, we have a great US economy, unemployment is down, build that wall, the caravan's coming, invasion, build that wall. I mean, facts can be, as Anthony said, flipped around. How do you deal with that at that point?
There are a few things like denying climate change or building a wall. a wall, it would be a waste of money, because in a few years you would find out, and very quickly, by the way, 3 to 5 years max, that people would be massively short of people coming from the south of America. So you would tear down that wall, by the way. For Marine Le Pen, it would be the same as Wilders. French growth would stop. The same is the discussion on Brexit and London and all that sort of thing. So I think they would very quickly say, well, yeah, and then they would need public relations to spin it, but that's not my problem.
Isabel?
You know, what I see that people, when you come with solutions, concrete ones, I took some examples, very basic, in fact, ones. The people, they are, I mean, happy to look at that. So they are.
Even if it goes against their political stance and their rhetoric and what got them elected.
In my view, yes. If you come with concrete solutions for the concrete problems, yes. And people, they need hope. They need solutions, they need hope. They need to envisage a better future. And populism, in my view, is in fact, I mean, boosted by the absence of that. So if you come with a vision that is effectively positive, and if you really try, and if you have first successes in your ability to reconcile value creation and good, positive impact, I mean, people, they are really happy to consider that.
And I do think, and it's folded a bit, but I do think the initiative that Donald Trump had to create this cooperation between industry leaders and government was a very good one. Looking around me in Europe, that's definitely not a structural thing. So we very
work out very well for him.
No, that's true, but I think that was more of a personality thing. But from an idea point of view, if you're always right, then you don't need to listen to anybody, right? So, but I do think there's many leaders, wherever they're coming from, once they're in power, they got a job to do, and I think they're open to advice. They're open to advice. But yeah, if you have the short-term sentiment that you want to explain every day what you did, that's tough. I think in general in politics we need to create a little bit longer lines than the next debate.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical out there and pretend to be Marine Le Pen. I cannot do the accent. So I'm going to ask you, I've just been elected as president, and I'm going to ask you, Isabelle Cocher, energy prices are going up, my people are unhappy, you are transitioning into the next generation of energy transformation, it's not working, do something about it. What's going to be your response?
Fortunately, we are a private group first. And then we are free to implement the strategy we are convinced about and our board is convinced about. I believe again in that kind of very, very important topic from a societal point of view. We are expected to come with solutions. And it's true for the purchasing power of people, and the debate is extremely violent, we could even say. It's true for immigration. I believe if you continue to look at immigration, the way we look at it for the moment, there is no solutions. You start saying, okay, a big part of that comes from the fact that conditions of life in these countries are not sustainable. Let's look at the best way to improve that. And I say that because the energy, again, is critical for that. You all know that there is 1 billion people without any access to energy. So in terms of conditions for life, it's very, very, difficult for them. And they cannot just trigger the development curve, these villages and countries where there is no access for energy for people, to energy for people. And so we triggered that. We triggered a huge action to set up infrastructure, very smart infrastructure, leveraging decarbonized energy, storage, hydrogen, etc., at an affordable price for villages. So yeah, if I had this debate, I would say, look, let's take the problems as they are today at scale. Let's look at that honestly, based on facts, and let's go for solutions. And let's embark people, employees and citizens, and look at the future a more positive way. That's what I would answer.
And I would ask you about your time frame, because stuff might not be working for 2 years, but they might be good for the next 5 or 10. Country where I come from, 60% is below sea level. So we created the country, but we're constantly threatened by water, which is the same in the US, right? And there's a business case in building a dam once or have a flood every 10 years with all the problems. The issue in the US is that a lot of public officials who do infrastructure are elected. So that's why New York has a 19th century sewage system, because it's not a sexy thing. But you need to treat it at some point, and how do we together make it something that you can go to your constituents with and I can finance, or we find a way. I think it's really finding this common solution and not you just asking us for, come up with the right stuff that I can sell tomorrow. It doesn't work, certainly not on, the real long lines on infrastructure, future of work that we need to deal with. There is an inconvenient truth for everybody, something we need to go through. There's no silver lining. It's not like this is easy for everybody. No, we need to do this. It's a bit like bringing up your kids. If you bring up your kids like, do what you want, it's always going to be great. You get very nasty kids.
I will not disagree on that point. I know we have a question at the back here.
As CEOs, you are in charge of direction and pace of change. But very
Do you
often,
introduce yourself as well,
I'm
please?
Antonella May-Portler. I'm senior partner at BCG. One of the things that very often happens is that external activists put CEOs under pressure, and NGOs put CEOs under pressure and want to change the pace of change. How do you deal with that? How do you manage the external pressures with your internal pacing that you think is suited for your company?
This is a real problem in my view. The fact that we effectively have, as a business community, to face some activist funds, and they are pushing for short term, really short term. And the name of the game is, okay, can we break your company? Would it make sense from a value creation point of view immediately or not? That's exactly the opposite of a long-term strategy. So it forces, the positive thing is that it forces you to be extremely performant, because if not, you have them on your shoulders, and effectively they can push for bad things. Bad because yes, immediately it may be good, but from a long-term perspective, it is, very often really bad in terms of ability for your company to really create value and make sense and have a positive impact. So this is a real trend, and in my view, we really have to think at that a better way. The traditional funds, investment funds, they become more and more passive, and they let their strategy done by these guys. And this is a problem. This is a problem. We need more regulation about that, in my view, a better governance.
I think there's also a point that very much raises off what I was earlier asking you about. What one senior board woman recently commented to me about was the Greta effect on boards, that people are now on boards so afraid of all of the implications of the anger levels, the broken trust. They're pushing managements to move faster, quicker, maybe into solutions you're not very comfortable with. Are you getting that feeling, especially in your industry, and even within the other industries that are also waiting for the young activists who want that quick change, want that change now? Is that having some kind of an impact on the way you look at your activism in terms of timing and duration?
It creates an atmosphere where the boards in particular, they are much more active, and that's good. That's the positive element of that situation. By definition, that's good. I really believe that in the future, board will be more and more active in the way the strategy is built, in the way the company acts, in the way the values are effectively implemented, and that's good. That's a positive consequence. But it is true to the extent where you can effectively keep your long-term strategy. It is absolutely clear. You know, we are companies that are there for decades. In our case, it's more than 100 years. And we are there, and we are performant, and we are profitable because we always implement a long-term strategy. So we have to protect that ability, absolutely.
Yeah, still, of course, performance is also the best antidote against activism. So you still, there is also this short-term performance where within your peers, you still need to perform in such a way that activism, you know, doesn't really have an angle to pull the rug from under you. What we more have is that we represent, call it flexible work, and that is still by many lawmakers being portrayed as we don't want to go there. But you need to embrace it. You know, it's not going to work that 80% of people will have unlimited time with one employer. So there is this we need to change thing and being associated with, you said we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I spend a lot of time explaining that, not so much our company, but call it flexible labor market as part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that is that's tough. There's a lot of activism there. Short-term, unions are fighting for their life, effectively, as an institution, which is, you know, they need to reinvent themselves. But yeah, they're not really doing that as we speak.
If they're not reinventing themselves as quickly as they want you as companies to help them out, and both of you have mentioned this, that people also need to take some of that responsibility onto themselves. It's not just a corporate's problem, or it's not just a governmental issue. And the question then is, how do you do that? Because that is a long, long time of getting used to certain things going a certain way for convenience sake. And when it's not in your hands and it's something you definitively want to change, it's in your hands to change.
Yeah, but as an employee anywhere, all people in the room here, there's only one certainty in life for you, and that is that your capabilities are relevant in this job market. So there's not the responsibility of your employer, not of your union, not of government. So what do we provide? Anybody can come to us and we can see what you do, what your capabilities are, and we can say to you, if you're fired tomorrow, if you would still have a job. And I would advise everybody to very quickly face that fact, because you get rid of the uncertainty. Again, don't look at anybody else, look at yourself.
In the energy business as well, that it's more than energy, it's more than about production of energy, the profit margins. Is the way you're looking at it more about the people and the implications therein and the responsibilities they need to take on as well?
That's clear that this is the responsibility of everybody of the company, in the company, to take care of its own employability. That's absolutely critical. But people, this is not something you need to explain a lot. Yeah. That's something people feel perfectly. No, the responsibility of the company is to propose different options in terms of mobility, in terms of training. So we have to be much more, much bolder than before. We more than doubled the effort in terms of training. And we almost doubled the mobility in the company.
Yeah, so there's a change within companies. Companies are not responsible for keeping people working at the company their whole life. They are increasingly responsible for training people, not just for the job they have, but for a job outside of the company. So that's why we're working way more with companies the size of an energy to say, okay, so what kind of capabilities do you need to provide your people with, or at least access to make them resilient whenever you don't need them anymore? And that's might sound like a bit of a harsh discussion, but we need to face that.
I fully agree. And with our unions, we changed the way we discuss these topics. And now we discuss about employability, which is very new.
Outside of NG, potentially, right?
Also outside of NG. And effectively, we look at them as people probably expected to stay in the company, which is fortunately what happens in the majority of cases, but that can effectively have a life outside, and we try to prepare them to that. So that's really something. Look at the careers now. It's very rare to say people having the same employer during the entire career. So they change a lot very often. That's much more natural for them.
I have a question in the second row, and then we'll come to you. He's been waiting a while, so the gentleman at the back, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Santiago Cregueras. I'm a senior consultant at the Inter-American Development Bank. And following up on Anthony's rocks and the conversation, it seems to be that for this activism that we are talking about and the importance of CEOs, sustainability leadership seems to be really important for survival. So I would like you, if you can, to share with us a little bit and elaborate on what your sustainability leadership strategy is as CEOs for your own companies. Thank you.
So that's explaining the strategy, right? Let me do the quick soundbite. So as a company, we're a platform. So we're a platform between candidates and clients. So historically, you always had to, you didn't know where jobs were, you didn't know where candidates were, you just contacted us. That market is becoming transparent. You can find jobs, you can find candidates. And where do we fit in? So 5 years ago, we launched an innovation fund. We've researched 2,500 HR startups to see, okay, can we be disintermediated? Because we want to be ahead of the curve and not being surpassed by a platform. So we're heavily transforming ourselves into a platform. 300 million profiles of candidates, 39,000 people on the street, selling data, labor market data, and redefining the human moment in staffing. That's what we're doing. That's a massive undertaking. I think we've now invested roughly $1 billion. That's a lot for us in acquisitions and change and to make our company get there. We're a bit ahead of our peers, but we don't regard our peers as our competition of tomorrow. And everybody knows that at the company. I wouldn't say that everybody wakes up and can translate the strategy, but that's what we're doing, and that's what we talked about. You need to go out to people, and then we think we can survive for the next 5 to 10 years, and then we'll see what technology brings us, but we need to stay very close to that core. It's never a given that you survive nowadays.
Isabel, Angie's sustainability strategy. It's core to what you do.
It is our strategy. It's the core of our strategy. You know, historically we are paid to produce energy and to sell energy. Now we are paid. We fully changed our business model. We reverted them. In fact, we are paid to help people to consume less and less energy. But the biggest métier business we have now, out of our 160,000 guys, 100,000 are paid every day to help clients to consume less energy. So we imported, that's very different from the historical CSR, which was more or less, I mean, generally speaking, something that was allowing groups to compensate the impact of their business. No, now that's exactly the opposite. You know, it is the core of what we are doing. So, but for that you need to adapt in depth your business models, and that's the reason why and I go back to the start of the beginning of this conversation. You need first to understand what is at stake. In fact, what is the most powerful trend you face? We considered that it was the fact that we go to more and more sobriety regarding energy, regarding resources. That's the main trend, because that's the only way to make our world sustainable. That's the only way also to manage the purchasing power. So we took that at the core of our strategy, starting from and then shifting fully the portfolio, moving to massive business of energy savings, adding some renewable capabilities, of course, to produce the energy that is nevertheless needed at the end, even if you provoke savings of energy. And then we imported TSR as a very core of our strategy. So we have no longer sustainability strategy. It is our strategy, full stop.
That's the interesting part about CEO activism. I think you hit the nail right on the head in that answer. It's not about offsetting your business's impact, it's actually changing the way you do business altogether. And that is very, very core to this entire discussion. We'll take 2 more questions, and then I know I have some things to ask you to wrap this up because we're reaching the end. 1 question to the lady here, 1 question to the lady at the back in the gray jacket.
Hello, I'm Pascal Frissos. I'm director of a consulting company, strategy consulting company, and also a president of an NGO called International Alliance for the Sustainable Development Goals. So I won't ask you any question about sustainability, but I'm very interested to know you've been able to move from promotion to promotion and then to reach the top, which is excellent. So what are your secrets?
Activism involves
sure.
a good ability to climb the corporate ladder. Yes, I'd love to know too.
I think there's 2 things that stand out for me at least. The first one is that early on in life when something went wrong, so I'm all my life with this company, I was running a branch and a consultant left me. And I didn't understand why that happened because I was running the best branch in the company, everybody liked me. And then my boss asked me, what has happened that he left? I said, I don't know, he didn't understand. So, and then since then, I've adopted this thing of if something happens, what could I have done? So also our strategy is all about what we can influence. I don't need anybody outside to run a strategy. If it doesn't go well, it's us. So that's one. The second one is whenever I had a great idea and my boss said that wasn't a great idea, I still did it. So I'm still on stage talking to Randstad people like the worst thing you can do is just do what your boss wants you to do. Because you need to make your own decision every day. And that's how you run a company with 5,000 branches. So I sort of, how do you call it, activism within the company, which I like.
Activist and very hardy, optimistic activist. There you go. That might be some of the formulation that you're looking at. Isabel, that would be an interesting question for you. A very short answer as to how did you get to the top? It's hard.
I don't know. No, I don't know. I mean, do something you like. Do something you are convinced about. Do something that is purely aligned with who you are. That's, I mean, the best answer I can give.
I think most of us never, well, speaking for myself, probably, you don't plan to get to the top. If you plan to get to the top, you're never going to get there. Just so you know.
It's a good thing I've never planned then. Question at the back.
Pika Rathod, Capital Employed Consulting. I'm a human capital specialist. So my question here is really around the gender activism. As a female CEO and as a human resources sourcing organization, we have lots of reports from the IMF, from the World Bank talking about the fact that we can get exponential economic growth by hiring women, by taking women to the top in leadership positions. And Isabel, everything that you've said today is fantastic. I think it's amazing.
Your question is?
So the question is, how can we get more women into leadership positions? And you're a HR resourcing organization. What insights have you seen that is moving things forward?
This is very close to my core because my...
You have a report out. I read that one.
Yeah, also. But no, but it's very, very close to my private core because my wife's a tax advisor in a law firm and she became the first female partner in 80 years. So, you know, this is at my dining table. For me, it's very much a pipeline thing. You need to start very early, and as management have a personal commitment to women, because women, like men, fight themselves less into a career, so to say. You really need to lure them out. Very cultural differences, by the way. We have 50% of women in management, so that's okay. But we start with a little over 60 at the shop floor, so we're still losing women. So you need to create, again, it's measurable. It is leading by example, reaching out to women, saying to them, you know, I want you in my seat within the next 10, 15 years. Something goes wrong, let me know. So it's very personal ownership next to a system.
How do you do it authentically, basically? How do you do it authentically for your clients? For clients who may not have the pipeline.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, for clients, it's again a pipeline. So we go in and we say, okay, let's look at your base. Let's look at what you have today and what would you look like 3 years from now. If you now have 10%, it's depending on sectors, of course, but if you have 10% or 20% of women in management and you want it, you need to have a good goal, 30%, how do you get there? And you need to make it a business process, otherwise it's not happening. If it's just good intentions, it's not going to happen. But at the same time, I talked about own responsibility. Women have responsibility there as well. I do see many young women, 28, 29, highly educated, taking a day for themselves every week. I say, yeah, sure, the Saturday, the Sunday, whatever you choose. So, you know, we're both in it together. It's also the Olympic Games. You need to train.
Isabel, do you want to answer that question about diversity, inclusion? Does a CEO activist have to pick and choose what they're going to be an activist about, or can it be on multiple fronts? Are you a diversity, inclusion-focused CEO activist, or are you currently focused on transformation of the energy business?
I believe that everything goes together. Because if you start really looking at your business model and try to identify big long-term trends, fundamental ones, you cannot afford not to look at that also. It's absolutely, everything is connected. So yes, we are activists also on gender diversity and diversity more generally. So we are not yet at your 50%. At all, we have
a different shop floor.
We are in this sector. That's very not easy at all. Huh? In this sector, we are less than 30%. I believe this is something you have to build a strategy. It is strategic, in fact, and you have to build your strategy as seriously as for the rest. This is exactly the same kind of step-by-step approach you have to build. But so in our case, we decided to fix the bar at the normal level, that is to say 50%. That's societies like that. Why wouldn't be this the case in our company? I mean, that's normal. That's a very normal target, in fact. That's a natural target. Now, but it's necessary to put the target first and then backcasting. If you do the opposite, step by step, without having in mind a big, bold goal, you cannot really change things. So we set the bar at 50%, and now, we would be happy to get your maybe your advice for that. But so we are in our way to build a strategy to go there, to build the pipeline, and this is in our métier. You know, we have decided to leverage apprenticeship. In my view, this is a big part of the answer. And we have set targets that are very ambitious. In France, for example, we target 10% of apprenticeship in our teams out of 70,000 people. So it's very bold.
And majority female, because you need to start at 60 or 70 to begin with.
And then you can compensate the fact that your own population is poor in female talents, and you compensate with a pipe that is very rich. And then with your population, but you have to look at that this way. It's not a point-by-point approach. It's a global one, strategic one, looking at populations, communities. We try to develop mentoring a lot, because what I see also is that the young female leaders, sometimes they just don't dare. So we need to organize communities, pushing their ambitions, giving, confidence to these young ladies. And then with examples coming of successful women, it comes, in fact.
That is quite interesting, because it sounds like this needs to be more than checking boxes and CEO activists seem to have strategies to go into this, and that's a clear sign that we have to look out for the authenticity of the move. That this is not a checkbox. Look at the overall strategy.
No, I firmly believe with the lady who posed the question that diverse teams just perform better. You know, cultural diversity is, by the way, a harder challenge because it's less of a pipeline thing, and many people who are culturally diverse, sometimes they don't approach your company to begin with. So, you know, you don't have a pipeline. So that's even tougher.
Well, on that note, we have about 5 minutes left. So there are two things I'd love to ask you. The first one, from a governmental standpoint, and I'm not going to call this a call to action, just some advice that we can leave the OECD with, perhaps. What are the 3 actions you think that governments need to do and think about as you're approaching your businesses and you're approaching societal issues outside of your businesses? What are the 3 things you'd like governments to focus on in the next year to the next decade? Because we are going into the next decade now.
Yeah, that's interesting to ask a government to focus on the next decade.
Well, let's leave election cycles out of it.
But on a serious note, like we do with companies, create these scenarios. So I advise a lot on the future of work. The demographics are pretty clear. The trend is pretty clear. The need for immigration and reskilling is very clear. And the data is there. So ideally, and we'll support and we'll reinforce the message with the OECDs of this world, but you know, be courageous. The funny thing is, we see a lot in Europe that once you are in government, you lose popularity anyway. Then at least do it while doing something which makes a change for the next 10 years. No, seriously. Because that's also how we, to a certain extent, oppose shareholders. There's always going to be people who, you know, don't like you closing your coal plants, don't like you investing more than a maximum profit could be. Yeah, well, that's okay. I think we are, certainly from future of work point of view, labor market view, we're at the cusp of some serious change. It's not going to happen. It's not going to improve the way we always did it. Those facts are clear. So I'm looking for courageous politicians, and I'll support them every step of the way, regardless if they are left-wing, right-wing, center, Christian Democrat. I know mine, because I don't think that where you're coming from is relevant to what we need to do as a company. It's way, as a country, sorry, it's less of a political thing. It's a necessity. Probably same as energy, but that's a segue into you.
That was a very smooth segue.
You know, in the energy field, a lot of things already happened. Look at the Paris agreements, the COP21. So really something emerged at the government levels. And it was it was new and really the beginning of a new era. Now the question is to maintain that mood and that momentum. And what is impressive, in my view, is to see that, in fact, companies are now probably the players that are the most active. In my view, the energy transition was at the beginning pushed by states, at the very beginning through subsidies, through schemes, public schemes, etc. And now what we see is that companies and cities, they are the most active players. There is a second wave that is starting.
One piece of advice you would say that the governmental factors or focus needs to be for governments around the world in the next decade. What would that be, if it's just one thing that you'd advise them as a CEO? They've already kickstarted it, you've picked up, and you're flying the button.
Create conditions. Don't try to act at the place of the companies or cities, but level playing field, set the conditions in place, ease the regulations, and align your actions to really support the strategic changes the companies they are concretely implementing. So create condition and look at the business a different way. Stop looking at the companies in a negative way with the idea to control.
Part of the solution.
But they are part of the solution. They are part of the solution. So that's advice I would give.
30-second answers because the 1-minute flag has now been raised. If you had to give 3 tips to the wannabe CEO activists in this room, 3 bits of advice that they can take away and implement right away in their companies, what would that be, Isabel?
That's funny, first. Maybe not easy, but funny. And leverage your guys. I would say envisage the leadership a very different way, and just look at yourself as somebody who is here to leverage the forces of your company. And certainly not as the leader, very visible, the unique visible part of your company. That's act as somebody that is just here to embody people.
Now, first of all, take care that your company is doing well, otherwise you're not credible as a CEO activist. And then second of all, find something you're very passionate about and ideally runs hand in hand with the core components of your company and what you're trying to achieve with your company. Then it goes natural and you can mobilize your people who also feel as passionate about it as you do. So you get a movement.
Well, thank you both very much for that ending, because it saves me from doing a conclusion. I just outsource my work. The Indian is outsourcing. Right. Thank you both so very much, and thank you all for being such an active audience and for all the questions you had. It just made this discussion so much more better for me than I can go back to my company a little bit more enlightened. Have a lovely evening. I think there are drinks, but I'm not sure. Oh, yes, somebody answered. Yes, excellent. So we'll see you up there.